start.spring.io. This link is used in your browser. Spring Initializer is downloaded in your computer and you are able to see this opening screen. This will ask you to enter some details about your application which you are going to develop. This is the home screen of Spring Initializer. First, it will ask you by using what tool you want to develop your web application. Basically, Maven is a tool and Gradle is a tool. Normally, Maven is chosen for developing your web application. Either of the two you can choose. Either Maven can be chosen or Gradle can be chosen. Spring Initializer carries Spring Initializer carry both the options. So let us choose Maven option. Then second question, it will ask you what language you are going to use for your web application. So as we are dealing with Java, so you can choose Java language. Other two options are also there. So you can choose Java here. The first option, the tool for developing the project, that is Maven. Second option, the language you are going to use, that is Java. Third option is what version of Spring Boot we are using. So this screen provides many options. You can choose the recent version, what you are going to use to develop your web applications. So this is third requirement that has to be filled up. Then the metadata regarding your project. Metadata matlab the data about data. What are the basic requirements for the projects? These informations need to be provided here. So metadata regarding your project, your group ID. Generally, a project is developed by a group, not an individual. In actual software industry, in actual environment, a group is responsible for developing a project. So this is your group ID. You give your group ID here. Then name of the Atticaft. Atticaft matlab the project identity. That has to be specified here. In this example, is given as a demo because we are going to develop a demo project. Group is com.example. Atticaft is demo. Accordingly, package name is fixed. This is package name within which your web application will reside. This is the name of the package. You must be knowing what a package is. So package name is decided, package name is fixed, package name is determined on the basis of these two information, group ID and Atticaft. Group is com.example and Atticaft is demo. Therefore, the package is com.example.demo. This is how package name is determined. So this is the root package. This is the main package within which your project, everything about your project, all files related to your project are kept within this package. So com.example.demo. Name of the package is decided, is determined on the basis of group and artifact name. Then third one is name of your project. You can give the project name. Normally, the name of the project is given, and name of the project depends on the nature of the project. For what purpose the project is devised. Suppose we are going to develop a project related to student management system. Then the name can be given as student management. Suppose we are going to develop a project related bank management system. So the name of the project may be bank management. Name of the project depends on the purpose for which the project is designed. Accordingly, we must give the name. Then description. Description matlab the purpose of the project. For what purpose we are developing this project. So these are the metadata that have to be supplied in the Spring Initializer home screen. This is the first step of developing your project. Step 1, navigate through this link so that home screen will appear. In the home screen, we need to supply all these informations. And another thing is packaging technology. What packaging technology we are going to use for our project? And practically, when a project is developed, the size of the project becomes very large. The size of the project becomes very large. So to compress the project, a large sized project is not handy enough to transfer it from platform to platform. That's why compressing the package is necessary. So there are many compression technology. So among many compression technology, one must be chosen here. So in this opening screen of Spring Initializer, in this setup phase, either you have to choose jar technology or you have to choose war technology. So these are the two available options. So among the two options, you may choose jar option, so that compression of your project will be made using this particular technology. Then version of the Java language. What version you are going in your project, you are going to use in your project for developing this project. So these are the options that needs to be provided. Then apart from these things, there is also another option in the right side, that is add dependencies. As you know, dependencies are nothing but some external tools, some ready-made external tools. And while developing our project, we may take the help of some other external tools, using which we can develop one or more components of our project. For example, view. Our project basically contains a model part, controller part, and a view part. Model part is related to database. So what database we are going to use? And what is the technology we are going to use so that we can bind our project with the database? Suppose we are going to use Hibernate framework. Hibernate is a framework that can be used for the purpose of binding our project, binding our application with the database. Database may be Oracle database, database may be MySQL database, database may be any other database. So for binding our application with a database, we need a framework. That framework is Hibernate. So Hibernate is called as a dependency. Similarly for view, view means presentation of information to the user. So what technology we are going to use for presenting information to the user? User means the user who uses the project, who will use your project. So your application can present many information to the user. So how the information will be presented to the user? In what format the information will be presented to the user? Whether HTML format will be used or JSP format will be used or theme leaf format will be used. So these are all external tools. For example, theme leaf. So theme leaf is an external format. That is a dependency that can be added here, so that we can use our view using theme leaf dependency. So basically, dependencies are external software tools that can be added to your project. With the help of these external tools, we can incorporate components, various components into our project. So database binding, for database binding, we can use JPA dependency. For view presentation of information, we can use theme leaf dependency. So there are many such dependencies. So this portion allow you to specify dependencies, add dependencies. When this is clicked, a list of dependencies will be displayed before you. Among the list, you can choose the dependency as per your requirement, what dependency you are going to use. So after specifying all these informations, first part is information about your project, second part is information about the project metadata, third part is information about dependencies. So after providing these three category of information, then you can click the generate button. When generate button is clicked, the Spring Initializer will create a zip file containing your project. Now, the overall structure of your project is ready with the initial settings in the form of a zip file. Zip file matlab compressed file. So in the form of a compressed file, your overall project structure template is ready. So that zip file will be available to you only when the generate button is clicked. After supplying all the informations, the generate button is clicked, then only you can get the zip file. So next step is download the zip file. Download the zip file and open your IDE. There are many IDE available. The most commonly used IDE is Eclipse. Then IntelliJ IDEA. This is another IDE. So any one IDE can be opened. Because IDE, as the name indicates, integrated development environment. IDE provides you a integrated environment. So within that environment, it will be easier for you to develop different parts of your project. So different parts of your project can be integrated together using the IDE. That's why the name is IDE, Integrated Development. Using IDE, every component of the various different components of the project can be developed. Using the same IDE, you can develop your view. Using the same ID, you can develop your model part. Using the same ID, you can develop your controller part. Using the same ID, you can develop your settings part, everything. All different components can be developed together within a single environment. That's why the name is IDE, Integrated Development Environment. So after downloading the zip file of your project, then open the IDE. There will be a file menu in the IDE. Go to the file menu, click the new option. Then you will get this option, project from existing source. Existing source is our zip file, our project. Just now we have created that. Just now we have created our source. So that's to be chosen, project from the existing source, and the existing source reside in this directory path, source /main /java. So this is the directory path within which our project resides. The project which we have created just now using Spring Initializer. The project that has been created just now using Spring Initializer that resides within this directory path, source /main /java. So within this directory path, our project resides, and once the project is imported, navigate to this one directory. We must go inside this directory, source main Java, so that we can open our project, which is named as demo application.java. So from within the IDE file, menu is to be chosen. From file, new option. Then from new, project from existing sources. What is the source? Now this is source. This has to be chosen. We must go inside into this directory structure. Then within the directory structure, there will be a file that is demo application.java. So we need to open this file. This is the screen before you. When you go to this source, src main Java, you will get this screen. This particular screen will carry demo application.java. This is demo application.java. This is the coding for demo application.java. When you try to run this project, there will be a main method into this demo application.java. There will be a main method within this. This one is the main method, demo application.java, within which you will find a main method. So when you try to run this project, you will get a error message. You will get this error message. This error message will appear before you when you try to run this application, because our application contains nothing. Simply we have defined the structure. And how to define the project structure, what are the steps followed for defining the project structure, we have only done that part. So our application contains nothing. When our application contains nothing, or we are trying to run the application, then we will get this error message. This error message is white label error page. White label error page is the default error message. That is the default error page. that appears when error handling mechanism is not incorporated into our project. We have done nothing, we have written nothing in our application. So keeping nothing in our application, when we are trying to run it, this error message will appear. This error message is the default error message, white label error page, that appears because of this reason. Because no explicit error mapping for error endpoint is given in the application. This error message appears when no explicit mapping for error endpoint that is given in the project. Mapping with error endpoint is not done in the project. That's why this error message appears. So to avoid this error message, we must have something into our project. Basically, Spring Boot project is based on the heart of this Spring Boot project is controller. The heart of the Spring Boot project is controller. So if nothing is there, at least there must be controller into our project. Because controller is responsible for handling the client's request and generating the response, so that project will work smoothly. The fundamental mechanism of web-based projects, the very fundamental mechanism is handling request and response, dealing with request and response. So web application matlab, requests are coming from the clients. The controller is responsible for receiving the request. It processes the request, generates the response, and sends back the response to the client. This is the fundamental mechanism of any web application. And this mechanism is called as a REST mechanism. REST mechanism. REST mechanism matlab representational state transfer. So REST mechanism says that there must be some request coming from the client, and controller of our project, the controller of our project deals with those requests and it generates the response, and the responses are sent back to the client. This is what REST mechanism says. So our web application, in fact any web application that works with this mechanism, REST mechanism. So till now we have developed such a project which is having no controller, nothing, no view, no controller, no model, nothing is there. Basically there must be three components: model, view, and control. Till now what we have developed, that particular project contains nothing. That's why the error message appears. This error message comes when we try to execute the project, when we try to run the project. So at least let us have a controller in our project, so that project will run smoothly. Without a controller, the project cannot run, because controller is responsible for handling client's request. So next step is to develop, to create the controller. MVC model. Try to recollect MVC model. MVC model, C stands for controller. So this is controller. So controller is nothing but a Java file, hellocontroller.java. So this controller, simple controller, is created for this particular project. Three annotations are imported to this file, to this program. Simply, this is a Java program. Three annotations are imported. So import get mapping annotation, import request mapping annotation, and import REST controller annotation. So three annotations are imported. Get mapping annotation belongs to this package of this Spring framework, org.springframework.web.bind.annotation. So this is the package of annotation. From this package, get mapping annotation is imported. Again from the same package, request mapping annotation is imported. Again from the same package, REST controller annotation is imported. Why these three annotations are imported? Because we are going to use these three annotations in our controller program. So first we have used REST controller annotation. This indicates that when REST controller annotation is used, it indicates that the following code represents REST controller. The following code will deal with request and response according to the principles laid down in REST framework. That is the indicator given by the REST controller. REST controller is an indicator that gives the indication that the following code, the below mentioned code, is responsible for dealing with request and response according to the REST principle. That is the job of REST controller. Annotations, in simpler terms, annotations are nothing but the indicators. They indicate something. They indicate something about the project. So REST controller indicates that the code below represents the controller that will handle request and response as per the principles laid down by REST framework. Then second one, we have used request mapping. The request mapping indicator is also another, it gives another important indication. What indication it gives? It gives that this is the request phrase. /hello is the request phrase that has been mapped to this class, hello controller. That means the request phrase is synonyms with hello controller class. When this phrase is used with the request, you can see here, this phrase is used here with the request. Request is sent in this way. HTTP localhost :8080 hello/hello. So this is the request phrase. This request phrase is mapped here in the code with hello controller class. That means that when this request will go to the server, server will immediately picks up this class for execution. Server will immediately picks up the object of this class, hello controller class, for execution. So that execution, immediately the execution begins. That is the purpose of request mapping annotation. So request mapping annotation maps a request phrase with the object of the controller class, so that when request goes to the server with this particular phrase, server immediately starts executing the object of hello controller class, because this is mapped with hello controller class. Similarly, get mapping. Get mapping is the third annotation. We have imported these three annotations: REST controller, request mapping, and get mapping. So third one is get mapping. Get mapping annotation, it maps with say hello method. Say hello is a method. Get mapping annotation indicates that when the request goes to the server, when server start executing this object, immediately this method will call. will be called. Say hello method will be called and it will get executed. And when say hello method gets executed, it gives this message, welcome to Spring Boot. So this is a simple controller that is developed and that is included in our project. The name of the controller is hello controller.java. After developing this controller, now this will be included in our project. Previously, there was nothing in our project. That's why this error message was coming. Now we have included the controller into our project, so that after including controller into our project, when we give this request from our client, this is our client matlab the browser. When the request is given using our client localhost 8080/hello, because /hello is the request phrase that has been used in our controller, that has been defined in our controller. So HTTP is the protocol, localhost is the name of the server, 8080 is the name of the port, and hello is the request. So hello request will run at the 8080 port of the localhost server. This is the meaning of this statement. The meaning of these request parameter. So hello is the request. That request will be executed at the port, the number of which is 8080. The port belongs to the server. The name of the server is localhost. These three constitute request: localhost colon 8080/hello. All the three constitute the request. The request is carried to the server by HTTP protocol. HTTP is the protocol. So this is the meaning. So this is how the request is framed and request is given in the browser, so that the request will go to the server, designated server. Here localhost 8080. When server encounters hello, as and when this server encounters hello, immediately as hello is mapped to the controller object, hello is mapped to the controller object. When the server encounters hello request, immediately it starts executing hello controller object. And within the hello controller object, this method is called, get mapping is done. So this method is called. In response to this method, it will return welcome to Hola, welcome to Spring Boot. That is the reason why this is displayed over the browser screen. So this is a simple project that demonstrates the mechanism of developing a project in Spring Boot. So fundamentally, these are the steps involved. At step number 9, step number 1 is, let us recapitulate. Step number 1, we need to download the start.spring.io. This is step number 1. So initial screen will appear. You can give all the initial parameters that is required for your project. Then step number 2, generate the zip file that will continue, that will constitute the structure, overall project structure of your application. Then step number 3, open up your IDE, whatever IDE you want to use, and import the project, that zip file containing your project. Import that project to your IDE. This is step number 4. After importing the project to your IDE, then identify the main file of your project. Identify the main application name. Here the application name is demo application.java, and you open it, and you will find that there is a main method in this file. Step number 6 is we are trying to execute that. When we are trying to execute that application, as our application contains nothing, so error message will appear. That is step number 18. That is step number 8. So step number 9 is, as our project up to this point, as our project contains nothing, so we need to develop different components. We need to incorporate various components of our project here at step number 9. We can add models, we can add controllers, we can add view. So we can add many other things into our project. That depends. What are the components we need to add? That depends on the requirement of the project. So in this example, we have added only a controller part. And after adding the controller part, then open up your browser and send request to the server named as localhost. When request goes to the server, the application will start executing and response will generated. Response is generated and that response is displayed over the screen. So these are the simple ways of developing a application into our using Spring Boot. Another thing is, when we start the Spring Boot initializer, some dependencies need to be added. We have already discussed. This is the section where dependencies are to be added. Whenever this button is clicked, a list of dependencies will be displayed. We can choose any of dependencies according to our requirement. This is one way of adding dependencies into our project. Another way of adding dependencies is how dependencies can be added into our project manually. So this is how dependencies can be added into our project manually. Let us discuss how dependencies can be added to our project manually. So add the following dependencies manually into our project. Spring MVC is a dependency. Hibernate is a dependency. JPA is a dependency. ThemeLeaf is a dependency. DevTool is a dependency. Actuator is a dependency. Database driver is a dependency. All these are external components. So as per the requirement, we can add any of the components into our project. So adding any of the external components into our projects, that process is called as dependency management. So dependency management is the process of adding dependencies into our project. So dependency can be added into our project manually, or dependency can be added into our project automatically, as discussed just now, using the home screen, initial screen of Spring Initializer. That is automatical way of adding dependencies. Now we shall discuss how these dependencies can be added manually. So in Spring Boot, dependency management and auto configuration, they work simultaneously. They work side by side. When dependencies are added to the project, automatically the project gets configured. Whatever dependencies are added with our project, automatically our project gets configured. Accordingly, the project gets configured. So the principle is dependency management and auto configuration, they work side by side. It is auto configuration that makes managing dependency supremely easy for us. So there is a file that is pom.xml. For developing our project in Spring Initializer, either we can use Maven or we can use Gradle. Either of the two tools can be chosen for developing our project. Either we can choose Maven tool or we can choose Gradle tool. Any one can be chosen for developing our project. So if we are choosing Maven, then this is the file pom.xml. If Gradle is chosen, then this is the file for dependency management. So there are two files. One is pom.xml, another is build.gradle. Pom.xml will be available in our project if we are using Maven tool. Build.gradle file will be available in our project if we are using Gradle tool. So any one file will be available. And the purpose of this file is to specify the dependencies manually. Whatever our project wants to use, the external tools, whatever the external tools that will be used by our project, all those informations are to be specified within the pom.xml in case of Maven. So pom.xml is simply a XML file. You might be knowing the purpose of XML file. XML stands for Extended Markup Language. This is a markup language. HTML is a markup language. Hypertext markup language. XML is a markup language. Both are markup languages, but the purposes are completely different from each other. The purpose of HTML is completely different from the purpose of XML. The purpose of HTML is to develop a web page, but the purpose of XML is used specifically for the purpose of data binding. So XML file contains a data structure in the form of a tree, data tree. And that data tree is bound with your application, so that our application can use those data that has been specified in the XML. So whole purpose of XML and HTML are different from each other. HTML is used for the purpose of developing web page, a static web page. And XML is used for the purpose of specifying the data tree that can be bound with our application, so that our application can use the data specified in the XML file. So pom.xml, pom matlab project object model. So pom.xml, that is available in our project, within which, using this file, XML file, we can specify our dependencies. What dependency we are going to use in our application. So manually, dependencies can be specified in pom.xml file. When a project is generated in Maven, whenever a project is generated in Maven, this file is available. So we have to add dependencies in pom.xml file. Now the question is how the dependencies can be added in pom.xml. To add dependencies in pom.xml, dependency descriptors are used. Dependency descriptors. Dependency descriptors are nothing but XML tags. As XML is a markup language, anything written into the XML file, it must be incorporated within XML tags. And XML tags are called as dependency descriptors. So within XML tags, we have to specify the name of our dependency which we want to add in our project. So while creating a new project, new Spring Boot project, we can add dependencies using this option. If the project is completely new, if the project is completely new, we want to start the process of developing the project, then these options may be used for adding dependencies. File, you go to the file option in the IDE, select new option, then select Spring Stack project, then next option. It will give you this screen. Among this screen, many dependencies are available. These are all name of the dependencies. The name of the dependencies are dev tools. The name of the dependencies may be missing. The name of the dependency may be NoSQL. Name of the dependency may be security. Name of the dependency may be maybe is not clearly visible. The name of the dependency may be cloud discovery. So these are all list of the dependencies. Among the various list, we can choose our dependencies. And these are all frequently used dependencies. So when the project is completely new, we are in the starting phase of our development process, then this options, all these options may be chosen from our IDE for including dependencies into our project. Another way is, if the project is an existing project and we want to add dependencies into it. If the project is existing project and we want to add dependency, as I told you, in the existing project, you will find this file pom.xml. So in the name of the project, current project, right click over the project, select Spring option, add status, then search for required dependencies, add them into pom.xml, then finish. Now dependencies will be added to pom.xml. So these options are available in the IDE. In the IDE, you will find your name of the project in the Project Explorer. Go to that name, right click on the name of the project. There will be a Spring option. Select the Spring option. Then there will be another option, Add Starter. Select the Add Starter option. It will give you the list of dependencies. Search for the required dependencies. Click Next. When you click Next, it will give you the file name, that is pom.xml. That means the selected dependency will be automatically added with pom.xml. Then finish. This is how dependencies can be added if the project is the existing project. And if the project is in initial stage, you are just going to start your project. project is a completely new project, then these steps are followed for adding dependencies. This window will appear before you, and from among the window, simply select the dependency. So this step is followed if the project is complete new, and this step is followed if project is a ongoing project. So whatever whether the project is a new project or the project is an ongoing project, always dependencies are added to the pom.xml. And pom.xml carries the dependency, and that will look like this. Dependency descriptor. This is dependency descriptor. Dependency tag. This is the starting point of dependency tag. This is the ending point of dependency tag. Within the starting and ending point, we have added this dependency. Spring Boot Starter Theme Leaf. This is the dependency. This dependency is added to the Spring Boot framework. So our group ID is org spring framework.boot. That represents our name of the framework, broad framework we are using. We are using this Spring Boot framework. That is our group ID. Then the name of the dependency is theme leaf is the name of the dependency. So when form.xml contains this dependency descriptor, our project will be bound to this descriptor. That means during development, our project can take the help of this dependency, theme leaf dependency, to create the view. So in our project, we can implement theme leaf dependency for the purpose of creating view. A view is created for sending response to the client. So this is how dependencies are added in pom.xml file in case we are using Maven tool for developing our project. So your pom.xml file may look like this. This is how the pom.xml may look like. So this is the very fast dependency, that is parent dependency. This is the very fast dependency, which is called as parent dependency. So by default, the parent dependency is added. The purpose of parent dependency is why parent dependency is added. By default, this is added. Every pom.xml must have this dependency, parent dependency. Parent dependency is added with the parent descriptor. Starts with the parent tag and ends with the slash parent tag. Parent tag and ends with the slash parent tag. Within these, the parent dependency is added. This is how parent dependency is added. The purpose of this dependency is, it is a special dependency. This is a special starter dependency that provides default configuration for our application. That is why this is added. Because the main concept behind dependency management is auto configuration. As we have discussed, auto configuration and dependency management, they go side by side. So when parent dependency is specified in the pom.xml, it initiates the process of auto configuration. That means all default configurations are set that are needed for our application. So parent dependency is a special dependency that provides all default configuration for our application, and it provides a complete dependency tree to quickly build our project. That's why parent is included in the pom.xml. Number one reason is it sets all default configurations needed for our project. Number two is it gives a dependency tree so that our project, the process of building our projects becomes quicker. That is the reason why parent framework is added. So after adding parent dependencies in our pom.xml, then other dependencies can be added. This is first dependency. The dependency is theme leaf. Theme leaf dependency is added. Then second is, this is second, that is web dependency. Web dependency is added. Then third is test dependency. Test dependency is responsible for unit testing of the project. There are many individual units of the project. Each unit must be tested before deployment of the project. Each individual unit of the project must be tested. So test dependency helps in that process. That's why it is added with the project. Then dev tools. Dev tools is the dependency that is added with the project, so that using various development tools, we can develop our projects. So these are all dependencies. Now the thing is, these are ways of adding dependencies into pom.xml. The fundamental thing is pom.xml should carry first, it should carry the parent dependency. Then after addition of the parent dependency, other dependencies can be added with dependency descriptors. Number of dependencies to be added into our project, all the dependencies should be added individually by the respective dependency descriptors. In this example, we have added 4 dependencies. That is the reason why pom.xml contains 4 dependency descriptors. This is 1, this is 2, this is 3, and this one is 4. So 4 dependencies are added. So whenever the question arises how to add dependencies manually in our project, the answer is very simple. We can take the help of pom.xml. Using pom.xml, we can add dependencies manually into our project. Then plugin. At the end of the pom.xml, there should be a section that is plugin section. So plugin section starts with build tag and it ends with /build tag. Now, what is the purpose of this section? The purpose of this section is we have added this plugin, Maven plugin, because in our project we are using the Maven tool. As we are using the Maven tool for development of our project, so Maven plugin is added with our project. The purpose of this one is it will build the project. After developing the project, entire project, when the development of entire project is over, it must be built into a consolidated form. So building of the project into a consolidated form, that can be done with plugin. That is done with the help of Maven plugin. So to take advantage of auto configured sensible default, we should add parent in our project, and for building that project, we should add Maven plugin into the pom.xml. So there are three sections into pom.xml. Basically, pom.xml is divided into three broad sections. Number one is parent plugin. Number one is parent section. Addition of parent dependency into our project. The purpose of adding parent dependency is to set all the default configurations, and it will supply a dependency tree for our project, so that using of the dependencies into our project becomes a easier process. This is first part of our pom.xml, adding parent dependency. Second part is adding various dependencies into our project as per the requirement. That may be leaf dependency, that may be database dependency, that may be test dependency, that may be web dependency, whatever the dependency we need to add. That is the second part. And all the dependencies are added with the help of dependency descriptors. And third part of our pom.xml file is adding plugin. So plugins help in building our project. After creation, after developing, after finishing the development process, the project must be built into a consolidated form that can have a plugin. That is the reason why it is added with pom.xml. So overall structure of the pom.xml is, first part it carries parent dependency. Second part it carries other dependencies, whatever is needed for our project. Third part adding plugins that is responsible for building our project. So these are the three components using which pom.xml is created. So in the first part of our discussion in today's session, in the first part we discussed about the steps needed for developing a project. So nine or 10 steps are necessary for building our project in Spring Boot. The second part of today's discussion was how to add dependencies into our project. With the help of those dependencies, we can develop our project. So this was the second part of our discussion. Now let us come to the third part of our today's session. The third part deals with another important concept. That is, always the web application contains three necessary components: model, view, and control. So model is an important component of the project. And model component of our project deals with the data part. The web application deals with large amount of data. So all these data are stored into the database. Model in the project is nothing but a entity object. Entity object is a Java object that represents our model. That entity Java object must be bound to the database. That's why ORM is necessary, object relational mapping. So object is mapped to the relational database. So for object relational mapping, we may use a tool, common tool, that is Hibernate. Hibernate is a framework that is necessary for object relational mapping. So object is within our application. Object is called as entity object. That entity object must be mapped with the database. Database carries the data. Database is relational database. So object within the application must be mapped to the data which are within the database. For this mapping, we need Hibernate or any other mapping tool that may be used. CRUD repository is there, JPA repository is there, Hibernate is there. So these are the many things that is available for you. Now the fundamental thing is how the database settings are configured in a application. Whatever the database we may use, whatever the tools we may use, the fundamental thing is how initial settings are made, how configuration settings are made, so that comfortably in our project we can use, we can perform on database related operations. So that is the fundamental thing. Before dealing with the database, before dealing with the database related operations, the required settings must be there into the project. The project must have the required settings for that. The project must have the required initial configuration for that. So how that can be done? There is a file which is known as application.properties file. Every project is available, is associated with this file, that is application.properties. Like pom.xml. Pom.xml file is available with your project, that is meant for specifying dependencies. Similarly, application.properties file is also available with your project, that is meant for specifying the configuration details of database settings. So application.properties, and this file is available in this source. You go to the project explorer of your IDE. The diagram is given. You go to the project explorer of your IDE. This is your project explorer. You might be knowing what an explorer is. Explorer is nothing but a tree. This tree represents all components of our project. So this is the project explorer. The name of the project is demo. The top of the tree. The top of this tree demonstrates the name of the project, that is demo. So this is at the root of the tree. Below the root of the tree, all other components are available. These are all other components of our project. So you go to this link, SRC, main and resources. This is SRC folder. SRC folder. Below the SRC folder, there is a main folder. Below the main folder, there are three folders. Java is a folder, resource is a folder, then Java resource. Yes, these are the two folders. So SRC, under the SRC, there is a folder named as main. Under the main, there is a folder named as resources. So within the resources folder, you will find application.properties file. So application.properties file is available with this path that is there in your project explorer. And this is placement of pom.xml. In project explorer, this is where the pom.xml is placed. Pom.xml. Pom.xml is placed here and application.properties is placed here. So when we explore the project explorer into our IDE, we can find the locations of application.properties, we can find the locations of pom.xml, we can find the locations of other components of our project. For example, this is the controller component of our project. The name of the controller is a demo controller. This is demo controller. The name of the application is demo application. Within the demo application, there is a controller. Name of the controller is demo controller. Demo controller is found inside the controller package. This controller package. Controller package is found inside the com.example.demo package. So this is how the Project Explorer is arranged, is organized. So simply Project Explorer is a tree of different components of our projects arranged systematically. So with this tree structure, you can find application.properties, you can find pom.xml, you can find other components of your application. Now the task is how to configure our database settings in this particular file, application.properties. So to configure database settings in application.properties, we need this coding. This small coding is necessary so that we can set initial configurations needed for all database operations. So this code segment must be there within application.properties. Application.properties not only carry configuration for database, it also carries other configuration details. So inside application properties file, we can specify properties like changing the port, database connectivity, connection to the server, name of the application. So all these properties, etc., etc. All these properties, whatever properties are associated with our application, all these properties, the details of all these properties can be set within the application dot properties file. Now our point of discussion is how to add configuration details of the database. Suppose our project uses MySQL database. As I told you, we can use any database in our application. Our application or our project must be flexible enough to deal with any type of databases. That facilities is there. For example, we are going to use MySQL database, and MySQL database is located at the back end of our application. The user interface is at the front end of our application. Database server is at the back end of our application. So using user interface, we can interact with our application, not directly with the database. User interacts with the application with the help of user interface. So user deals with the application using user interface. User doesn't have direct access to the database, which is at the back end. That is the reason why application is to be connected with the database, because user cannot access the database directly. Database is just below the application layer. So application can have access to the database. User cannot have that access to database. For accessing the database by the application, connectivity is necessary. And these things, the properties required for this activity, the connectivity of our application with the database. To do this activity, settings are necessary. And all those settings are mentioned in the application.properties file. And these code segment, this specific code segment are necessary for setting of the initial properties so that connectivity between application and database is possible. The first line is, this is the package sprints.jva.hibernate. As I told you, Hibernate is a tool framework that is responsible for ORM, object relational mapping. Application contains the entity objects. Data is there into the relational database. Therefore, objects should be mapped with the relational database. That is done by Hibernate. So there is a package that is sprints.jpa.hibernate. This property must be set to update. DDL auto is equal to update, because dealing with the database involves updation operation. Data can be fetched from the database. Data can be written into the database. That can be modified into the database. So all these operations belongs to updation, the process of updation. So DDL auto is equal to update. That means this operation gets enabled. The property says that the update operation gets enabled, so that application can interact with the database, and any updation activity can be conducted. DDL matlab data definition language. DDL auto is equal to update. This is number one, property number one. That must be there into the application dot properties file. Second one is URL, data source URL, spring.datasource.url. That means database, normally the relational databases are placed inside a database server, and all operations related to database are conducted by the database server. So our project gets executed by the application server. Application server deals with the database which is located at the database server. So during the execution of the project, many servers are involved. Our application server is involved, and at the back end, behind the scene, database server is also involved. So we are using a MySQL database. And for MySQL database, this is the specification of the server. MySQL database server that runs at port number 3306. And this port is located at localhost server. And localhost server is designated by MySQL host, that is identified by MySQL host. This identification indicates that this local host is a database server. MySQL host, this identification indicates that this local host is a database server, and that database server is based on MySQL database specifications. And this server runs at this port, that is 3306. This is the meaning of this part of the property. And what about DB example? DB example is the name of our data source. This is the name of our data source. That means DB example is the name of the database. Database may carry lots of tables, data tables. For example, student database. Student database is the name of the database. DB example. Here we can specify student database. So student database is a database that may carry many tables. So there may be a student table that will carry the personal information of the students. There may be a branch table that will carry the name of the branches the students are studying. That is another table. That may be a third table, that is examination table. So informations related to the examinations of all students that are kept into the examination table. That may be a fourth table, that is fees table. Whatever the fees are paid by students, all such informations are present into the fourth table. That may be fees table. So our database, the thing is, our database, the student database, may can contain many tables, and each table carries related information about the students. And all such tables are constituted together and integrated together in the form of a database. And that database is called as a data source. So this URL stands for Uniform Resource Locator. Our resource is located here. That's why the name is resource locator. Database resource is located here. Here exactly the database resource is located. The name of the resource is DB example. That is located at this address. So that is what it is, URL. So URL property of the data source is set at this value, JDBC MySQL name of the server with the port address, and this is the name of the database which is running at this port of this server. So this is the second most important property that defines the details of our data source, which is at the back end of our application. This is number 2. Number 3 is access permission. Who can use this database? In a big application, everybody may not have access to the database. As I told you, user doesn't have direct access to the database. Application has connectivity with the database. Our application can use the database. Now the question is, how application can use the database? So application can use the database with the help of a user. So who are those users? Who are those users who can use the database using the application in between? Application sits in between the user and the database. And the question is, who are the users who can use the database using the application? So user cannot use the database directly. User can use the database using the application. Now, who are those users? So these are the details of the users who can use the database using the application. Username is such and such. Here Spring user is given. This is the name of the user who can use the database through the application. This is the password of the user who can use the database through the application. So at the time of establishing connectivity with the database by the application, the details must be given. This specific user can use the database. The user which is assigned with this username and this password, that particular user can use the database only. That particular user can have the access to the database only. So this property says about the username and this property says about the password. So when application gets run, when application starts running, the user wants to access the database. Directly the user cannot access the database. Before accessing the database, the application will ask you to provide this information, username and password. If user supplies the username and password correctly, whatever data is supplied by the user as username and password, they are mapped with the username and password given in the application.properties file. If the information supplied by the user matches perfectly with the information given in the application.properties file, then only access will be granted to that particular user so that user can use the database. So these are the two lines responsible for setting the properties related to username and password.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Is there any order that has to be followed to connect all this? Like the username and password should be given first, like that, anything?
What?
No, these are the steps to connect with the SQL database, right, sir? So do we have to write all these in any order, or any order we can, or do we have to follow some order?
No, all these instructions must be written within the application dot properties file.
In any order, sir.
In any order. In any order.
Thank you, sir.
Then the last part is driver. What is the driver name? What driver we are using? What driver we are using to represent our database? As I told you, the database we are using is MySQL, and MySQL database is located at the database server. And what is the name of that server? That name of that server is this much is the name of the server with the port name. Now, the database software, that is MySQL database. Driver means the database software. The database software is designated by a name that is called as driver. As far as MySQL is concerned, the name of the database driver is com.mysql com.jdbc driver. So MySQL database software is identified by the driver name, and the name of the driver is com.mysql.jdbc.driver. This specific name pattern is followed to represent the MySQL database software. Similarly, if we are using Oracle, it has got its own name. If we are using any database, every database has its own name, own driver name. So whatever the name of the database is, name of the driver software, database software is, that needs to be specified here. So driver class name property of the data source. Driver class name properties. This is the driver name as far as MySQL database is concerned. Similarly, you can find the database driver names for other databases also. There are specific driver names of other databases. You can make a search from the Google so that you can find a list of driver names related to the respective databases. And this name is specified for the MySQL database. So as far as database connectivity is concerned, our application.properties file must carry these lines so that our application can make connectivity with the database, and our application can do many CRUD operations with the database.
Sir, one question. What does DDL auto stand for?
DDL stands for data definition language. DDL stands for data definition language. The auto property is updated. That means this operation will be done automatically. This operation gets enabled. DDL auto property operation gets enabled with update value, because connectivity with the database is done for the purpose of carrying out various operations. The operations are primarily four basic operations: CRUD. C is create operation, R is read operation, U is update operation, D is delete operation. So creation is a update operation. When database is created, we are updating the information. Deleting is a update operation, and making changes into the database, that are also update operations. So whatever operations we are going to do with the database, so basically the fundamental thing is we are conducting update operations. That's why this property gets enabled here, so that after making connectivity, we can perform all these operations.
Thank you.
So this is enabling of the operations, and other four are related to the data source. As I told you, data source matlab the database. Data source is database that is located at the back end. So first line indicates the position of the data source, where exactly the data source is located. This is the name of the data source. This one is the name of the data source DB example, and this data source is located at the localhost 3306. Then this is the username information and password information. So this is the name of the username. This is the name of the software, the driver name of the software. So with these information, we can update application.properties file. If application.properties file carries these, we can make connectivity with our database. Another example is given, that is S2 database. This is also another form of database, S2 database. There is a difference between MySQL database and S2 database. The fundamental difference lies between the two is H2 database is a in-memory database. This is a in-memory database. Whereas MySQL is not a in-memory database. This is a persistent database. MySQL database is a persistent database. That's why this package is used, jpa.hibernate. jpa.hibernate. JPA represents the principle of persistency. JPA, Java Persistent API, JPA. So MySQL is a persistent database, but H2 database is a in-memory database. It is a client-server application. It is generally used in unit testing. So our application must be having many units, individual units. Before deployment of application, each individual unit is tested. So for the purpose of conducting unit testing, this database is specifically used. And it stores data in memory, not persistent on this. So this is another database. It has got its specific usefulness. So it is used in a limited space, limited sense. This is used in broad sense. As far as database CRUD operations, CRUD operations, this database is used. Relational databases are used for the purpose of performing CRUD operations. But for the purpose of performing this type of operations, only for this purpose, this database is used. So if we want to use this database, H2 database, then these are the settings. They must be, these settings must be incorporated into the application.properties file. So first line is h2.console enabled is equal to true. First console, the interaction with the console, through the console, that property gets enabled. That is true. So we can interact with this database using the console. Using the console, we can interact, user can interact with the database because that property is enabled here. So console.enabled is equal to true. So interaction with the database using console is possible now. Similarly, URL. The data source, this is the name of the data source. This data source is located at this location. As this is a in-memory database, so the name of the location is this one. Difference between SQL and S2 is it is located at a server. There should be a database server. The data source is located at the database server. But in this case, as it is a in-memory database, the data source is located in the memory itself. So JDBC colon H2 colon mem colon name of the data source. So this is name of the data source. Then this is the name of the driver. The name of the SQL driver is com.mysql.jdbc.driver. Name of the H2 driver is org.h2.driver. As I told you, every database has its own driver. So this driver represents the name of the software, the main software, database software. And this is username and this is password. Who is that particular user who will use the database? Who can have access to the database? So this is username and this is password. Then what platform? Database platform. So we can use this database in the Hibernate platform. And the name of the platform is H2 Dialect. H2 Dialect is the name of the platform using which this database can be used. So for performing a specific operation like unit testing, we can use H2 database. So MySQL is a general purpose database. For using MySQL as a general purpose database for performing CRUD operations, these settings are necessary and these settings need to be incorporated into the application.properties file. For performing specific purpose operations, H2 database is used, and for using H2 database, these properties are to be incorporated into the application.properties file. So two examples are given here how application.properties file are written with all these properties for database connectivity. Another thing is there is an alternative for application.properties. The alternative is YAML. The alternative is YAML. YAML is another markup language. XML is a markup language. HTML is a markup language. YAML is also a markup language. YAML stands for yet another markup language. YAML stands for yet another markup language. In comparison to application.properties, if properties are written within this XML file, it will become more easily readable. So when we compare application.properties with application.yml. Application.yml is more readable than application.property. That is why application.yml is preferred over application.property. Either of the two will work as far as initial properties are concerned. As far as setting of initial properties are concerned, either of the two will work. Application.properties will work, application.yml will also work. But one is more readable in comparison to another. That is the reason why application.yml is preferred over application.property. If the same thing has to be written in application.yml, the property needed for MySQL database, the same thing has to be written in application.yml, then this coding pattern has to be followed. This is the coding pattern used in application.yml. This coding pattern is to be followed. So Spring is the root. It is written in a tree format. In application.yml, it is written in a tree format like XML. Everything in the XML file is represented in the form of a tree. Similar the case with YML. Whatever you want to write into the YML file, it is written in the form of a tree format. At the root of the tree, this tag is used. Then data source. Data source is a sub branch of the tree. The name of the data source is URL, JDBC, MySQL, whatever name we have specified in the application.properties. This is specified here as the data source name. Then this is username and this one is password. So when somebody reads this file, it will be very easier for the person to understand what these lines means. Easily he or she will understand that this is the username. Easily he or she will understand that this is the password. So if you compare this coding pattern with the coding pattern used in application.properties, then you will find that the coding pattern used in application.properties is more technical. Spring.datasource.username is equal to SA. Spring.datasource.password is equal to password. So this is not easily understandable by a normal user. So in this sense, it is said that application.yml is more readable because coding is more user friendly. Less technicalities involved into the coding pattern. So password, simply username is the label and this is the name of the user. Password is the label and this is the name of the password. Then driver name is the label and this is the name of the driver. And JPA framework we are using is Hibernate is the JPA framework. Within the Hibernate framework, we have updated the DDL auto option. That is, all operations will be effective with the database. The same thing, the same configuration, the same initial settings that can be written in the application properties in this way, involving more technicality, and the same thing can be written into the YML file, application.yml, involving less technical, so that it becomes more readable. So number one, we have discussed today how to develop a project in Spring. Number two, we have discussed today how to manually set the dependencies needed for our project. Number three, we have discussed about the properties of the project. Whatever properties are needed for our project, how the properties can be written into application.properties or application.yml file. So all these things are fundamental concepts involving with programming. So before doing any programming, before doing any development, creation of any project, we need to use the fundamental concepts into our program. Now the fourth part of our discussion is REST controller. How REST controller can be created to fetch information from JPA repository. JPA repository means JPA belongs to JPA. JPA Hibernate implements JPA principle, Java Persistence API. So Hibernate is a framework that represents JPA principle. Using this, how can we perform this operation? Fetch information from the database. So after accessing the database, how can we retrieve information from the database? So putting information into database and retrieval of information from the database. How this operation can be performed using a REST controller. REST means the controller that works on the principles of request response model. REST controller is responsible for dealing with all the requests coming from the client. The controller deals with all the requests coming from the client. Mostly what requests? Requests dealing with how to fetch information from the database. When such type of requests are coming from the client, then it is the responsibility of the REST controller to deal with those requests, process those requests, and establish connectivity with the database and fetch information from the database. And database is based on the principles of JPA repository. JPA repository is nothing but a library. JPA repository is nothing but a library. And that repository contains these two repositories, CRUD repository and paging and storing repository. So CRUD repository is consisting of CRUD operations, deals with CRUD operations, create, read, update and delete operations. We need to fetch information. Fetch information matlab reading operation, R operation. Fetching information means reading information. We need to read the database and retrieve the information from the database. So these operations can be carried out by using CRUD repository. CRUD repository is a part of JPA. Similarly, paging and sorting repository. This is also a part of the JPA. This repository contains classes that can be used for the purpose of paging operation and sorting operations. So for performing paging and sorting operations, this repository is used. For the purpose of performing CRUD operation, this repository is used. In this controller, in this particular REST controller, we are going to use the CRUD repository because we need to do the R operation, reading operation, fetching information. For that purpose, the controller is developed. This controller is developed for that purpose. So step number 1, we need to add these dependencies into our project. Web dependency, H2 database dependency, Lombok dependency, and JPA dependency. These 4 dependencies need to be added with our project. H2 database is used for the purpose of performing unit testing. That dependency is added with the purpose of dealing with JPA repository so that we can perform CRUD operations. Lombok dependency, this is a ready-made dependency. This is used for the purpose of reducing the code. More specifically, getter and setter codes. As you know, a class can contain getter methods and setter methods. You might be knowing all those things. Setter methods are used for the purpose of assigning values to the data. Suppose there is a class. The class has two fields, name field and ID field. We need to assign values to the name and ID field. For assigning values to the name field, there should be a setter method, set name. So there should be a set name method for assigning value to the name field. Similarly, there should be a set ID method for assigning value to the ID. So these methods are called as the setter methods. Similarly, there are some getter methods. Getter methods are used for the purpose of getting values from the fields. We need to get values whatever is there into the name field. So get name method is used. We need to take the value whatever is there into the ID field. So get ID method is used. So get name and get ID methods are getter methods. Set name and set ID methods are setter methods. So while developing the application, getter methods and setter methods are used for these purposes. And Lombok helps in reducing the code involved into the getter method and setter method. That is the usefulness Lombok dependency. That's why it is added, so that our code gets reduced. So JPA dependency is added for performing CRUD operations. Lombok dependency is added for reducing the code involved in getter and setter methods. H2 database is used for the purpose of testing, and web dependency is used for the purpose of developing the web applications using Spring Boot. So these are the dependencies that can be added. How these dependencies can be added? As we have already discussed, pom.xml used for the purpose of adding these dependencies. So this is pom.xml. Parent dependency is added first, so that all default configurations are set by the parent. Then other dependencies. This is the addition of web dependency using dependency descriptor. This is the addition of JPA dependency, and this is the addition of validation dependency, so that the validation can be done. Validation is an important part. So without validation, the project doesn't have any meaning. Any user can access anything if there is no validation. So there must be validation, proper validation process. The user wants to access your application, there must be a validation mechanism that says that yes, this is the authenticated user. So that's why validation is required. So for this purpose, this dependency is added. Then finally H2 dependency is added. Then a Lombok dependency is added. So all these dependencies are added through pom dot, then plugin, maven.plugin, which will build the project into a consolidated software package. That's why Maven plugin finally added. So this is pom.xml. Then to organize our project, we need to create 4 packages: entity package, repository package, service package, and controller package. The diagram indicates that the controller package will carry the controller program, that is department.controller. So the department controller that belongs to the controller package. Controller package will carry our controller program. Similarly, entity package will carry our entity. The main entity is department. In this particular example, so department is the entity, so that is placed under the entity package. Similarly, repository. So under the repository package, there is a program that is department repository. Similarly, under the services package, 2 services are there: department service and department service implementation. So our project is organized into this pattern. Our project contains 4 packages. Each package is having the related components, is having the related programming components. So controller package will have department controller program. Entity package will have department entity. Repository package will have department repository. Service package will have 2 different services, department services and department service implementation. So this is the structure according to which our project is designed. So first is, let's create all these things. Department.java, this is the entity part. This is our entity, department entity. So department entity is the model that will represent our data. So department entity belongs to the entity package. So entity package is imported. Package com.amiya.sprintboot demo project.entity. So whatever program we need to develop here, department.java, that will be placed under this package, entity package. So now the department.java, as it is a entity, so it contains these fields. Information is related to department. So department entity means it is nothing but the model. So it has 4 fields: department ID, department name, department address, and department code. These are the 4 fields that constitute the department entity. And these are the annotations. There are many annotations used in the program. The entity annotation says that the code below, the code which is defined below, that is a entity, that represents a entity. That is what is identified by entity annotation. Similarly, data annotations represent that in the code there will be getter method, setter method, etc. will be used for the purpose of assigning values to the different fields. So this annotation represents that. Similarly, no argument constructor and all argument constructors. There should be 2 arguments. One is no argument constructor, which is as default constructor. Default constructor is used for the purpose of assigning default values to these fields. And all argument constructor is used for assigning specific values to this field, the original values for these fields. One is used for assigning default values, another constructor is used for assigning original values to all the fields. Similarly, builder annotation represents that, it identifies that this entity will be used for the purpose of building a entity instance. So department class, department entity will be used for the purpose of building a department object, department instance. That's why this annotation is used. So basically, department.java represents the model. Model is nothing but specification of data. So this entity will carry primarily these 4: ID, name, address, and code. And this is placed inside the entity package. That's why entity package is imported. This is placed inside the entity package. This is first part, department.java. Second part is department repository.java. This belongs to the repository package. As the structure says, this class, this program, department repository, is placed under repository package. So what it carries? It carries repository. Repository means this extends JPA repository. A JPA repository is consisting of department and the primary key, the type of the primary key. Department entity is having 4 fields: department ID, department name, department address, department code. Among the 4 keys, there is a primary key. The primary key is department ID, and type of the primary key is long. So that is specified is here. That means our JPA repository consisting of department entity with the primary key, that is long type primary key. This is what our repository is. So department entity will be treated as a repository that will belong to the department repository. It is nothing but an interface. It can be implemented in a class. This department repository can be implemented in a class. Similarly, department service. Next one is department service. What service it will provide? Department service belongs to service package. There are two types of service. One is department service and another is department service implementation. So department service will supply you this information. Fetch department list. When this will get executed, it will give you a list of information that is present into the database. So fetch department list. All the information present into the database that will be retrieved, that will be fetched from the database. It accepts one parameter, that is department parameter. Department parameter is the object of the department class. This is the department class and this is the object of the department class. This is the entity and this is the instance of this entity that is used by save department method. Save department method fetches the list from the database and that list is listed here for the purpose of viewing. So this is first service, and second service is department service implementation. It also belongs to the service interface. As it is a implementation, it implements the department service interface. This is the implementation of department service implements, which is defined here. Department service. Department service is a interface that having one method, that is save department. This gets implemented by the department service implementation class. Here it is implemented, that interface is implemented so that the operations can be performed. First operation is save operation. Anything is saved into the department. Whatever we want to write into the database, this operation is performed. Whatever we want to retrieve from the database, this operation is performed. Okay, one is saving operation. Saving operations enables us to save information into the database. And another is fetching operation that enables us to fetch all information from the database. That's why find all method is used. Find all matlab, it will find all the information from the database and that will be displayed. So fetch department list. So here is a class, here is a service that implements this interface. This interface gets implemented by this service. So there are two services. One is department service implement, another is department service. So apart from these two services, another component of our project is, that is department controller. This is the main component of the project. It will accept all the requests, it will process the request, and it will generate the response. So this is department controller. Department controller contains this code. So this is the code, department controller. One is department save development. It will handle the saving request. Whatever the information to be written into the database, all those requests are handled by this method. So everything will be written into the database on execution of this method. Similarly, another method that is responsible for listing the information contents into the database. This method handles the request coming from the client asking for a list, whatever is there into the database, that will be displayed. So these are the two controller methods. One method deals with the saving operation, another method deals with the listing operation. These are the two controller methods. So this will invoke the method that is described in the implementation class. This is this class. This will invoke this method. This method will be invoked by the controller. This method will be invoked by the list controller. So these are the two controllers. two controllers are responsible for invoking two methods. This controller will invoke the method meant for saving the information into the database. This controller method is responsible for invoking the method that is responsible for listing the information which is there into the database. So this is our controller, and as per the specifications in the project, this application properties file is set. Application properties file that is set, that specifies the port number. Our application will run at this port. Then this is the setting for H2 database, because we are using H2 database. Then running the application. Then running the application. This is how the application is run. This is how the application is run. First is endpoint is department. When the request goes to the server, when the request goes to the server with this endpoint, department endpoint, it will post request. This is a post request. Post request matlab saving operation will be performed. This will enable the application to do the saving operation. Whatever is there, that will be saved into the database. And this is a get operation. Get operation, get request, that will enable the project to fetch the information from the database, and it will give you a list. So this is how a project is basically developed as far as database operations are concerned. So in today's session, we have discussed many important concepts. Let us recapitulate. First, we have discussed how to create a project using Sprint IO, Sprint initializer. Second, we have discussed how dependencies are included into our project using form.xml. Third concept, how application.properties or application.yml are written so that property parameters can be set that are needed for our project. And fourth important thing is how a practical project is developed dealing with the database connectivity, dealing with JPA repository. So all these things are discussed today. I hope you are all getting what I am saying here. So using these concepts, you need to practice with your application. You need to practice how to develop the web applications. Anyway, whether
excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Sir, I had requested sir to provide like a beginner, as I am a beginner, non-computer background.
What I cannot follow you. What?
Like a beginner, I had requested sir to provide the list of tools and IDs, how to go about it, sir, so that we can practice at home as well.
Okay. In the coming class, in the tomorrow's class, I shall give the details.
Yeah, sir. You had told that you will be providing, sir.
In the coming class, I think tomorrow is the last session.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow is the last session as far as this paper is concerned. All the details I will give in the tomorrow's class.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. So that we can practice at home.
Okay. I shall give you that.
Thank you, sir.
This is all about from my side. Thank you very much. We shall meet again tomorrow at 8 o'clock.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.